In the chilled hush of a candlelit cloister, where the damp stones of the abbey whispered more secrets than scripture, medieval intimacy was neither public nor passionate. It was controlled, calculated, and curiously ritualistic. For most commoners, love and desire were woven into the rhythm of seasons. So, reap, rest, repeat. There was no swiping, no seductive glances over wine, no bedroom songs echoing under silk canopies. Most unions began with a nod from a parent and ended with a nod from a priest. In these ancient villages, people slept in communal spaces. Parents, children, elders, all bundled together on straw beds. Privacy was a scarce luxury. Lovers who sought moments of intimacy had to tiptoe past creaking wooden floors, muffled whispers, and even livestock that shared their quarters. The hearth in the center of the room was often their only witness. Yet within these constraints, there existed a quiet world of longing and coded gestures. A touch of a linen sleeve, a brush of fingers during a communal meal, the lending of a carved comb or piece of embroidery. These were the flirtations of the medieval world. Even among the nobility, where opulence clothed desire in silks and tapestries, intimacy was governed more by duty than by affection. Marriage was a political tool. Passion, if found, bloomed in the shadows, rare and delicate, like a poppy among stones. In monasteries and nunneries, vows of chastity fought daily battles with the stirrings of human nature. Secret letters passed through cracks in chapel walls, confessions whispered too closely in candlelit chambers, and dreams left unspoken became their own form of ache. Not all held fast to their vows. Many broke them, quietly, tragically, or defiantly. Sleep now as we step softly into this forgotten world, where the rules of desire were drawn not by hearts, but by duty, piety, and the ever-watching eye of the Church. Before the Church tightened its grip on Europe's soul, public bathhouses were far more than places to cleanse the body. In towns from Paris to Prague, they echoed with steam, laughter, and the rustle of linen towels. These spaces blurred the line between social and sensual. Men and women sometimes bathed together, naked, relaxed, and unwatched by the rigid eye of God, at least for a while. Bathhouses were not dens of lust by default, though the clergy often warned they led to it. They were communal like everything else in medieval life. Conversations were shared in the warmth of the water, deals were made, songs were hummed, and yes, some subtle glances were exchanged. The smell of scented herbs like lavender or mint, steeped in copper tubs, made the air thick and drowsy. It was in these scented vapors that curiosity awakened and longing whispered. But not everyone had the luxury. The poor rarely bathed, some never. Their lives were filled with dirt, toil, and rules. If they shared a moment of closeness, it was usually under moonlight, in the woods or behind barns, not in fragrant waters. The further down the ladder you were, the less softness the world offered. Bathhouses eventually became suspect. The Church deemed them gateways to sin. Laws were passed, shutters drawn, and silence imposed. But for a brief glimmer in time, they stood as steamy sanctuaries where human skin, stripped of roles and ranks, met warmth, and sometimes connection. Let the warmth of that bathhouse steam lull your thoughts now. Let the flickers of oil lamps and the soft splash of water lead you gently toward sleep. By the 12th century, love had found itself imprisoned between parchment and prayer. The Church, ever the architect of guilt, declared that passion must serve only one purpose: procreation. Anything else, it warned, was sinful, shameful, and possibly eternal damnation. Imagine that to love wrongly was to risk your soul. Clergymen penned thick guides, books like the penitentials, detailing every act, every position, every possibility, and whether it was blessed or blasphemy. They recorded what was allowed, what was questionable, and what would surely summon fire from heaven. A husband who kissed his wife too lustfully was to be confessed. A wife who dared enjoy pleasure was to be corrected. The flesh, in the eyes of these scribes, was a doorway to ruin. In confessional boxes across Europe, men and women whispered their sins. Not crimes of theft or blood, but of thoughts and touches, of dreams that lingered too long. Priests listened, nodded, and assigned penance. A week of fasting for a forbidden thought. A pilgrimage for a moment of ecstasy. It was control, sacred and silent. But people are people. Behind monastery walls and beneath chapel floors, even those who wore robes and carried rosaries sometimes failed their own laws. Nuns bore children in secret. Priests took lovers behind cloister gardens. Passion, it seemed, was not so easily banished by ink or incense. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, picture a wooden confessional dimly lit by candlelight. A man trembles as he speaks, not from fear of God, but from the ache of desire he cannot name. His voice is low, his heart louder. Let this quiet moment carry you toward restful dreams. In the hushed chambers of noble castles, marriage was rarely about love. It was about land, lineage, and legacy. A wedding was less a celebration of affection and more a contract signed in the presence of wealth, witnessed by banners and scribes. Dowries were counted before kisses. Vows were made often by strangers. And once the guests had feasted, once the minstrels had played their final lute song, the couple was led, sometimes awkwardly, always watched, to the marriage bed. Yes, watched. It was not uncommon in noble houses for a witness to remain in the room, to ensure the union was consummated. The sheets, afterward, were checked for blood, a symbol of purity, though biology cared little for the pressures of nobility. These rituals were less about love and more about proof of control, of chastity, of ownership. The bed itself was grand, carved from oak, surrounded by thick curtains that offered more decoration than privacy. Tapestries of saints and battles hung nearby, watching in still silence. The bride, often a girl no older than 15, lay beside her new husband, who might be double her age. They rarely knew each other. Desire had no place here, only duty. And yet, within these beds, life began. Children were conceived, heirs born to bear titles. Some couples, over time, found tenderness. Others lived as strangers, bound only by crown and creed. Tonight, as your breathing slows, imagine that wooden bed. The embroidered sheets, the cold stone floor beneath it, the flicker of a lone candle, and two souls trying to learn the meaning of closeness in a world where even love was ruled by law. Beneath the roots of the formal world, outside the gaze of priests and noble scrolls, there lived another realm of knowledge, the secret, sacred wisdom of women. In dim cottages, smoky with incense and herbs, old women known as herbalists or wise wives passed down truths their grandmothers had whispered before them. These weren't lessons from Latin texts or cathedral pulpits. They were drawn from soil, moonlight, and blood. They knew the rhythm of a woman's body long before science did. They understood how certain flowers eased pain, how particular roots stirred desire, and which leaves could delay a child's arrival or invite it. In societies where men ruled books and politics, these women ruled cycles and healing. Of course, the church feared them. To be a woman with knowledge, especially knowledge of the body, was dangerous. Many were accused of witchcraft, their work branded as sin. Still, the desperate came. Young wives terrified of another winter pregnancy, maids who had tasted forbidden touch and feared the cost, husbands looking to rekindle a spark grown cold. These herbalists didn't judge. They prepared teas, oils, and charms with calm hands and deeper understanding. And they spoke in quiet circles of pleasure, of how closeness could be joyful, not just dutiful, of how passion wasn't a devil's trick, but a shared fire that needed only safe tending. So rest now. Imagine one such cottage, with dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, a fire crackling gently, and an old woman mixing petals into warm water. Her voice is low, her eyes knowing. Outside, the church bells toll. Inside, wisdom lives on. Among the most curious and often misunderstood symbols of medieval sexuality is the chastity belt. Tales of cold iron contraptions locked around women's waists, keys held by husbands departing for war, and locks that jingled like chains of virtue have haunted imaginations for centuries. But were they real? Historians now believe that the chastity belt, as popularly imagined, may be more legend than reality. There are few surviving examples, and most are later forgeries or museum curiosities from the Renaissance. The earliest references are satirical, appearing in poetry or drawings meant to mock overly jealous husbands. Yet the myth persisted, perhaps because it said something true about the age. Whether real or metaphor, the idea of the chastity belt captured the essence of medieval control. A woman's body was not her own. It belonged to her husband, her father, or the church. Her desire was something to be guarded, locked away, feared even. Virginity was currency. Purity was power. And any breach of that sacred veil brought shame not just to the woman, but to her entire bloodline. Some noble families even inspected their daughters for signs of innocence before marriage. A cruel, invasive tradition wrapped in the name of honor. And should a woman step outside the lines drawn for her, she faced not just gossip but punishment. Public, brutal, and permanent. Tonight, let the clang of that imagined iron fade. Instead, picture the silence of a woman's room, the creak of floorboards, the flicker of a candle, and her breath steadying in the dark. In her stillness lies a quiet rebellion, waiting, just waiting.